Welcome. Funny, I was muted. So, I'd like to take a second here, or a few minutes, to speak with you about a place that I've been in recently. Um, and so, this is navigating spiritual rebellion. What I'd like to talk to you about a little bit today is the difference between the wounded fighter and the conscious rebel. And so this has shown up for me personally as I've been working on messaging and putting my program and my work sort of out there in the world. And so I've been tracking how I feel about advertising and bringing my spiritual work into the marketplace. About a year ago, I hired a business coach to help me with this process and to help me with this step. Really, she's a marketing coach. For a long time, I very much resisted advertising. Actually, for a long time, I very much resisted even communicating clearly what it is that I do. It was really hard for me because I had such a big, vast story about the earth and being here on earth being unsafe and the system sort of being corrupt that I felt anytime I would bring my spirituality into that world, that it might cause the spiritual practices to become tainted or unpure. And this is also true with the way I felt about bringing my spirituality forward into mainstream society. And at the same time, I also knew that it was really time for me to bring my magic forward and start serving as a teacher, right? And there's a way, especially as healers, we tend to be hyper focused on that we really want to help others, which is true, which is absolutely true. And that's what I want to do. And also, the desire, the excitement, the nudge to bring my work forward into the world as a teacher isn't just about helping others. It's also what my soul wanted. And there's a way that I think we can sometimes sort of resist what our soul wants because that feels selfish and focus more on how we're serving other people, right? And what I'm noticing more and more is actually they're usually a match. And when I ignore the part that is coming from my own desire, I'm usually missing some awareness that helps me to serve others more. So here I am, kind of starting the journey with formally bringing my work forward in the world about a year and a half ago, and then getting coaching and help doing that about a year ago. And so what I've noticed through this journey is when I started, I really came at it with this wounded fighter mentality. Like, I kind of wanted to go up against the system just because it was the system. And I have a history from this wounded fighter place, from this place of feeling like it's unsafe here. And in order to maintain my safety, kind of keeping everything distance by finding a problem with it all the time, right? So I, for a long time, kind of carried this automatic contrarian attitude to things that are popular or mainstream. Like if it's mainstream, I'm not doing it automatically, right? And this showed up in my life in a lot of different ways. And not only did it cause me to avoid my soul work for a long time, but it also showed up like battling the system in different levels or in different ways, like switching jobs a lot, avoiding any kind of standard job. Now, that being said, doing this in and of itself, not doing mainstream jobs is not a problem on its own per se. But we want to be conscious of why we're doing it and what's fueling that decision. And so at the time, I was seriously committed to this like wounded fighter path. And the way it feels when we're committed to that is that we just can't ever really get ahead, you know? And so the most recent, I guess, piece or realization that I'm working is actually the thing that I'd been resisting is the thing that's been offering me a lot of medicine. So I resisted sort of the marketing and advertising and being clear about what I do for a long time to avoid that spirituality mixing with mainstream and with money. And avoid playing by the rules, right? Again, this is that wounded warrior that's like, not doing it, whatever you say. Even if it's the right thing to do, not doing it. And what my learning has been is, makes me think of that Picasso quote, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. And this is really the heart of what I want to speak to today. So let me take you on another journey. I did the same thing initially with religion and spirituality in general. So if you are here, there's a very good chance at some point in your life you had a conflict with a religion or a religious system. Maybe even either being brought up in a religious community that didn't accept you or being wronged by the religious community. And so it is natural and understandable and important that when we have this experience that we allow ourselves to be angry or hurt or frustrated by that experience. And we don't want to stay there. This is the place of that wounded warrior. And so what I find is oftentimes those of us that are called to these alternative spiritual paths have kind of had a run-in with these religious communities, and we keep that. We like grab onto that and hold onto it wherever we go. And so here also we sort of like run into this conflict where we want to make them wrong all the time. And this is the wounded warrior. And oftentimes what we're actually seeking is to find a middle ground or to receive acceptance for who we are from this community that we've experienced as making us wrong. And then the wounded warrior comes to the other side and says, and ends up doing the same thing that they've done to you. You know? And so what we actually want to do is move from being the wounded warrior to being the conscious one. And so another way that I've experienced this in my life was using the word shaman. Actually, let's back up. Even just using the word healer. Same theme here. I didn't want to soil what I experience as being this very deep work within the world of consumerism. So actually, it wasn't even up until a few years ago that I even publicly referred to myself as a healer. Prior to that, that was something, if other people wanted to call me that, fine. People would find me through word of mouth, but I definitely wasn't advertising or proclaiming myself as anything, right? And so I was really holding on to that same sort of pattern. And it's good because I needed to develop some more skills and understanding before I was really ready to come forward with that title. Because honestly, when we bring ourselves more forward, it means there's more places where we're able to experience or where we might experience ridicule because more of ourselves is coming forward, right? Rather than sort of just letting forward these few pieces that we feel like are safe. And then we end up cutting out a whole bunch of who we are, and we're not interacting with the world in the fullness of who we are. So if I hadn't had the tools to do that, to move through that place, I would have seen that ridicule and immediately gone to war with it, or retreated inwards, reinforcing that, it's not safe to be who I am and that they're wrong for doing that. I also did the same thing with offering a certification. Even though I have spent, at this point, more than half of my life working with and training in shamanic practices, as well as other modalities. And for a long time, there was this idea that if you were to offer this title for the thing, that would be wrong. How can we take the vastness of everything that we are and all that we do and everything that we learned and shrink it down into this piece of paper, right? But that's not all that it is, And you'll hear me say this a lot, the certification, it doesn't actually mean anything. And it doesn't not mean anything either, right? And so sort of resisting bringing this cosmic and spiritual work and letting it show up in the mainstream 3D ordinary reality became this pattern that I was fighting against from this wounded place, from really this place of being afraid to be who I am in the world. And so what happens when we rebel from the wound is we can only see what we're up against. And as long as we keep the good away from the bad, then the bad can't actually get better. It's like if everybody with integrity pulls out of money, then money becomes corrupt. Same with politics. And the solution isn't actually for people with integrity and experience to pull out of the system. The solution is actually to have those that are in integrity and experiencing a deep spiritual journey to bring their medicine forward and integrate it with the system to help restore the harmony. A big block for me was around integrity for a long time, with bringing my work forward, calling myself a healer, calling myself a shaman, offering this certification. So this was a place that was uncomfortable for me. And what I had to do is really begin to trust myself deeper. How do I know that I'm in integrity, right? Because I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes I'm going to get it wrong or ruffle some feathers or hurt some people. And of course, I want to be compassionate. I don't want to hurt people. But I also can't use worrying about that to prevent me from really coming out and meeting the world in the fullness of who I am. And what I've actually noticed is, how do you know you're in integrity? Well, because you worry about it a lot. People who aren't in integrity don't sit around worrying about whether they're in integrity or not. So there's a pretty good freaking chance that if you're worried about being in integrity, you are, right? So now I understand where I am, like what I'm doing, which is creating space for this modern shaman to immerse into the world, to reconnect into the world via, as individuals, connecting to our own inner shaman. And I'm very excited about this journey and helping individuals bring their medicine forward. And my soul is longing to offer this in a way that feels in integrity. Like the offer itself, the work that I offer is in integrity. And so coming back to the beginning with advertising and marketing, this is where my question mark has been. So a lot of marketing specialists will tell you that you basically need to exploit people's pain in order for them to realize that they need something from you. And so it's kind of like re-traumatizing people into thinking they need something, and then selling from there. And of course, that doesn't feel right in my system. It never has. Fortunately, I work with a great coach that helps me find sort of this authentic place, and kind of works with that same philosophy, is like learn the rules like a pro so you can break it like an artist, right? So this tactic works if you're interested in selling, but that's not what I'm actually interested in doing. I'm interested in connecting. And what I found is I wouldn't have realized that that's what I actually want to do if I hadn't taken this journey through marketing. And I had to learn the rules of the game, so to speak, to work the part of me that was afraid to show up and be seen. And what my realization has been is the culprit wasn't actually this bad system that I've had this big story about for such a long time. I was just actually using that system as a point of blame to keep me from showing up all the way. And we do this with a lot of things. My story happened to be the system. Sometimes our story is about, our partners, or about our kids, or about money, or about being too busy. And so this is finding something to fight against, right? And when we're rebelling from the wound, from where we're hurt and afraid to show up, we're actually rebelling against ourselves. We're rebelling against our own soul. Before I learned the rules, so to speak, what I was doing was trying to jump the line. I was trying to offer my work forward in the world by skipping this step of learning how to do it through our system, if that makes sense. Like I was trying to jump the highest level, like, oh, maybe I can just, like, if I just spend most of my time like meditating and attracting, the right thing will come, and then I won't have to do this piece with advertising and marketing, right? And the journey has been, as I've worked with learning the marketing skills and how to do that work, I'm also working on the part of me that objected to that. Being seen, being met, being perceived in a certain way, being afraid that if I do something, I might be perceived in a way that I don't want to be perceived. And now I get to shift to this exciting place. Now that I feel like I've had an experience with the rules of the game and working the part of myself that was in resistance to that, now I can actually practice spiritual rebellion. Because what hasn't changed is how I feel about the system. This isn't sales to me. This isn't a thing about numbers. But I do have to be okay with exchange. And for a long time, I actually wasn't. And so my offering genius just wasn't able to come forward and meet the world. So I'm switching gears and focusing more on sharing my experience and speaking from the heart and connecting through what I offer instead of exploiting the pain. Now, to be fair, I haven't been doing a lot of the exploiting in the first place because, again, I was almost automatically in resistance to that. And I fortunately worked with a coach that helped me do this in a way that I could get clearer and more comfortable bringing forward what I do and saying what I do and being clear about how I can help people, without focusing on what without focusing on pulling that pain out of people and making them feel like there's something wrong. And also, there's still a lot of pieces to the marketing that I've been encouraged to do it this way because this is guaranteed to work. This is like proven strategy. And I am saying I'm actually done with that. I'm done with that. Um, you know, so what I keep my eye on is if we really want to be a bridge to the new earth, we have to be able to straddle both sides of the land, right? So if our old paradigm is the mainland and the new earth is this island, we can't get much done if we are trying to get to the island from our wounded warrior. What that looks like is actually trying to avoid the mainstream, the mainland, and try to build a bridge from the new earth to the new earth from the island. Like, that's not going to work very well, right? Like, you're already out on the island. How are you getting supplies? How are you going to build this bridge? It's going to take way more time and a lot more work. It'd be like trying to jump to the island and building the bridge backwards. And so this is why we learn tools and rules of the game, so we can explore and learn the part of ourselves that's in resistance to that, so that we can be more clear about who we are and why we want to move forward. Because honestly, if you're not in alignment with what you do, no level of marketing is going to fix that. Like, you might make money, but it's not going to fix your soul. And so here again, like, that wounded warrior might look at the greedy CEO and be in resistance to that, right? Because that's wrong. That's not how we ought to be, which I agree with. And also, it's not all wrong either. And so here again, if we bring more of our spirituality to meet the system, then we can start building this bridge to the island rather than being in these two separate places, right? Similarly, if you're like a starving artist trying to take down the system, actually the best thing that you might do is get a job. Like, yeah, I know it's the system, but once you have the foundation, then once you have the foundation to be able to take care of your needs, then you can break the rules from sovereignty instead of suffering. And honestly, if you aren't ever really part of the system in the first place, is it actually even rebellion? Or is it just avoidance? And so this is where I've been, noticing that the story I had about being a change maker and fighting the system was actually my wounded warrior just trying to avoid. Now that I've had an experience with the rules, with understanding the mechanism of the old paradigm, with participating in the old paradigm, I can break the rules from a conscious place. And when you get to that point where you can actually consciously rebel, this is a place that actually makes a difference. So, as a proclamation of sorts, marketers want me to sell Shaman School for twice what I offer it for, because they know it's worth much more. They want me to lead my advertising campaign with "Get certified as a shaman," and they want me to speak about this work by speaking to the pain of what we might experience when we're called to the path, and how shaman school will fix that for you. That's not what this is. Shaman school is about knowing ourselves deeply and turning inwards to self-trust. This is what the real journey is. It just so happens that I teach you tools to do this, and that you can use to facilitate others. And so as I shift from the way it's been done, the old paradigm, to the way that feels right for me, I actually might not hit the numbers that they want me to hit. It actually might take me longer to reach my own goals. And what I believe is that I will be connecting with people that can really feel my signal and listen to their own nudge. So I'm consciously rebelling here, not from my wound, not from my fear of coming forward, but from my sovereignty and from deep self-trust. And so the invitation for you is to take a look at a place that you might be always up against the other in your own life. And ask yourself if this is a wounded response, or if you are actually responding from conscious rebellion. And so it is. Thank you for joining me today for my transmission. Thank you for being with me and allowing me to be witnessed and share with you some of my actual process and what's happening in my inner world right now. I would love to hear your thoughts, your experience with this, or where you might realize you're a match, either this week or as you move forward. And so it is.